There's theoretically no limit to how many actions you can take based on one trigger. So let's take a look at another example of where you might do multiple things in different apps based on one event happening. For this example, I'm going to enlist the help of we use a student management system called Weworkbook. It's really good. And I love Weworkbook because they've built a lot of API stuff. So that's the technical stuff in the back end that allows for these kind of connections to happen. So in Weworkbook, our trigger is going to be when a student is deemed competent in a unit of competency. Then what we want to do is get that data and issue the student with a digital badge, because micro-credentials are huge at the moment. And not only that, is that we're going to take another action based on this trigger, and that is to put a note in our CRM in HubSpot and say, hey, look, this person has been deemed competent and they've been issued a digital badge. So a benefit of this, looking at the benefits, is that it improves student motivation and it improves engagement and recognition. Students love this idea of badges. And so it's a really good, simple automation to put together. And I think it improves team communication and awareness. So let's take a look at the trigger of something happening in Weworkbook, a student being deemed competent, and then taking that information, issuing the student with a digital badge in Accredible, and making a note of that in our CRM in HubSpot. Now, of course, you might use a different student management system, and hopefully if they're on the cutting edge of things, they've probably got something else set up like this. If not, ask them. And you may use a different credentialing system and a different CRM. So these are just examples to help you understand. Let's take a look. In this example, we're going to look at Weworkbook, our student management system, and when we mark someone off as competent, we're going to issue them a badge. So we've authenticated Weworkbook and we need to choose the trigger event, which is updated outcome. So when we mark someone as competent, then that will trigger off the process with some relevant data. So we've already authenticated Weworkbook and it's all set up and ready to go for us. So we just keep following the steps through in Zapier. And now we're at the stage where we want to test the trigger. So to do that, we're going to need to go into Weworkbook and put a result. So we've got MacGyver again, and he's just been deemed competent in TAE ASS 502, Design and Develop Assessment Tools. So we're going to set that result there, give it a date, and save. And then we'll see what's happened behind the scenes. So we'll go back to Zapier and test our trigger. And here we go. So we've got success. We've got a request that's come through and lots of data there that we can use, which is great. And now we're looking for Accredible, which is our badging, our micro-credentialing system. You could use anything like Badger. There's other different types out there. And the action event is create a credential. And we just need to go through the authentication process, which we've already done. And we set up our action. So now this is where once again, we're using the data that's come through from the trigger. Now, we want this to be different every time it happens. So we're going to use the variable of the unit of competency code. So that was there somewhere. There we go. So we got TAE ASS 502. So it'll know to make a different badge depending on what the unit the student was deemed competent in. We need the recipient name. Again, this will need to be different every time. So Weworkbook, the student management system, sends across that information. We do need to make sure we put a space in here between the first name and the surname. Pop their email in there. And this one's going to be towards the certificate for in training and assessment. And we'll leave the rest of that there. We'll put in an issue date. Now, this is a really cool thing about Zapier is you can use plain English for the dates and just write today, and it will actually update that with the date that it was issued. So we'll run our test, And there we go, happy days, nice green tick, test was successful. And we can see we've just received an email that's come through, and we can see that Angus MacGyver here, we're pretending we're the student, here is your badge, and they can click on the button and go in and see that the badge has been issued, which is fantastic. Now we're going to continue on our steps. So normally you just finish it here, but we're going to press this plus button here, and we're going to add another step. So we can keep doing more with the data from the trigger. And so we want to put a reference in our customer relationship management system. Again, another engagement. This time we'll just put in a note. So we follow through the steps. We've authenticated our account, and a few little things. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. We'll just look at the really basic things, and because the way you use this will be different depending on what apps you're using. So we've just put in the student's first name and surname, remembering the space there. They've just achieved competency, and we're just typing this in plain English. We're putting the unit code. We're writing, how awesome is that? And we're going to put the email address in. This is how HubSpot will identify which student to associate this little note with. And of course we run our test. And it was successful. Very good. So let's have a look and see what that looks like in HubSpot. So here's our student, MacGyver, and we can see Angus MacGyver just achieved competency in TAE ASS 502. How awesome is that? So you can see it's taken our text and our variables and just put it all together in a nice, neat string. So we can run this again. Just once the Zap's been switched on, this will now run every time someone is deemed competent in the student management system. So that's an automation that's going to just keep running whenever something happens, whenever the trigger happens. So we turn on our Zap and we can see our 3 steps there. But let's just test it. Let's run it again with another student, and we'll see what happens. So we'll go back in there. This time we're going to do Inspector Gadget, and Inspector Gadget has been awarded competency in TAE LLN 411. And we can see we've got the email come through. So the automation has just run all in the background. So we don't have to, once it's all set up, we can basically set and forget. And we'll just look up Inspector Gadget. And there we go. So now we can see the same message came through, but this time with different variables. Inspector Gadget just achieved competency in TAE LLN 411. How awesome is that? So that was pretty cool, finding out that a student's competent and issuing them a micro-credential, a digital badge, all automated, and then putting a note of that in HubSpot. So one trigger and taking 2 actions based on that.